The US dollar has long been the backbone of the global economy. It's the currency most commonly used for international trade and finance, backed by the world's largest economy. But slowly and steadily, countries around the world are questioning their reliance on the dollar. So, why are we seeing a shift away from the dollar now, and what does this mean for the global economy? How did the dominance of the dollar come about? The dominance of the US dollar dates back to the end of World War II, when the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 established the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Since then, it has been a key player in the global economy, used in everything from oil to gold to government reserves worldwide. About 60% of foreign exchange reserves are held in dollars, and it's the currency of choice for nearly 90% of global forex trading. But the last few decades have seen subtle yet impactful changes. As emerging economies like China, Russia, and countries in the Middle East grow in influence, they're exploring ways to conduct trade outside the US dollar. From bilateral trade agreements in local currencies to new central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, countries are diversifying their currency reserves. China and Russia trade in yuan. Middle Eastern countries eye oil deals outside dollar, rise of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. So, why are these countries moving away from the dollar? There are several key reasons. Reason number 1. Sanctions and geopolitics. Over the years, the US has used the dollar's dominance as a geopolitical tool, imposing economic sanctions on countries like Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. These nations want to reduce their vulnerability to US control, looking for alternatives to protect their economies. Reason number 2. Rising US debt and inflation. The US has accumulated a national debt of over $30 trillion, and high inflation rates are eroding confidence in the dollar. Countries with large dollar reserves worry that they're holding on to an asset that could lose value over time. Reason number 3. Growth of alternative economies. China and the EU are growing in global economic influence, with China's economy set to become the world's largest in the near future. Many countries want to avoid being overly reliant on the US, especially as they engage more with these alternative powerhouses. Key players in the de-dollarization movement. Leading the de-dollarization movement are countries like China and Russia. China has established the yuan as a currency for oil deals with countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia, while Russia is actively pursuing non-dollar trade agreements with partners. In 2023, BRICS, an economic bloc comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, even announced plans to develop a new currency for inter-BRICS trade. The role of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Another game-changer is the rise of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. China's digital yuan is the first of its kind and could be used for cross-border trade, reducing the need for the dollar. With the infrastructure in place, other countries may also adopt CBDCs to increase the efficiency and security of their own international transactions. Digital yuan pilot expands. More countries explore CBDCs. If the world successfully shifts away from the dollar, there could be significant effects on the global economy. Here are a few possible impacts. Impact. Number 1. US economy and inflation. The US would lose a key advantage in being able to borrow cheaply from other nations. Less demand for dollars could lead to inflationary pressures within the US. Impact number 2. Global trade and forex markets. Global trade and forex markets. With more currencies in circulation, exchange rates may become more volatile, making global trade less predictable. Impact at number 3. Power shift towards emerging economies. Countries like China and others in the BRICS alliance could gain more influence over international financial policies, creating a multipolar financial world. However, shifting away from the dollar isn't easy. For one, the dollar is deeply ingrained in the global financial system, from banking to international loans to supply chains. Plus, investors still view the dollar as a safe haven during crises. A full transition could take decades, and even then, the dollar may still play a central role in some areas. The question now is, what will the future look like? We could see a multipolar financial system where multiple currencies share the stage, or even a new global currency issued by an international organization. Either way, The slow shift away from the dollar is already transforming the economic landscape, with the potential to reshape the balance of power. As the world rethinks its reliance on the dollar, we're entering a new era in finance, one that could bring greater diversity in trade, but also greater challenges in stability. So, while the US dollar isn't disappearing anytime soon, its unrivaled dominance might just be a thing of the past. China's economy is on track to become the largest in the world, surpassing the US. China has heavily invested in high-tech industries, from advanced manufacturing to AI and robotics, positioning itself as a leader in innovation. Additionally, China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project across over 60 countries, gives China both economic influence and new trade routes, enhancing its global reach and strategic advantage. Here's what Singapore diplomat and geopolitical consultant Kishore Mahbubani thinks about the future of the two superpowers, America and China.
The Chinese dream is about the prosperity of the country, the rejuvenation of the nation, and the happiness of the people. It reflects both the ideal of the Chinese people today and our time-honored tradition to seek constant progress. The Chinese dream will be realized through balanced development and mutual reinforcement of material and cultural progress. Without the continuation and development of civilization or the promotion and prosperity of culture, the Chinese dream will not come true, unquote. And I think in those few sentences, he brilliantly captured what is the heart of the aspirations of the Chinese people, to move away from an era of having been humiliated for a long time to an era where they once again feel proud about Chinese civilization and what it can accomplish. And indeed, if the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, could change its name to CCP, the Chinese Civilization Party, then I think it would be a more accurate description of the goals and aspirations of the CCP. But of course, while this may be the motivations, many in the West continue to believe that China's approach is flawed because it is not changing its political system. And you can read in, whatever, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Economist, there's this constant belief that the best thing that can happen to China is to have a collapse of the Chinese Communist Party and have a democratic system. The one slightly provocative point I'm going to make here is be careful what you wish for. Because if the Chinese political system becomes more democratic, it could very well become far more nationalist and far more aggressive as a power. And the great paradox here is that the Chinese Communist Party is actually delivering a global public good by restraining Chinese nationalism. And if you didn't have a strong Chinese Communist Party in charge, you might actually get a more nationalist, a more assertive China. So I believe that it's actually in global interest to allow the Chinese Communist Party to evolve and change in its own way. And that way, I think we will have a China that focuses on economic growth and focuses on strengthening its civilization. Let me now turn to the second question I said I would discuss, which is US-China relations, because clearly the relationship between the world's number one power, which today is United States, and the world's number one emerging power, China, is a key dynamic. And here, it is actually remarkable how stable the US-China relationship is. In theory, when the world's number one emerging power is about to surpass the world's number one power. And as you know, in PPP terms, China did surpass the United States in 2014. You should be seeing naturally, logically, and I think Steve Wall might agree, rising levels of tension between US and China. But instead, quite remarkably, we're seeing a very stable and indeed a calm relationship. And of course, the question is why. And here I think we have to pay a lot of tribute to the United States for having managed very well the relationship with China. If indeed the United States has been remarkably benign over the years towards China, starting from the days of 1990s. I mean, of course, starting, of course, from the Cold War and Kissinger's trip and America's efforts to bring China on board in the Cold War alliance against the Soviet Union, and then opening up the American market, as I mentioned earlier, to Chinese products. And even after the Tiananmen episode of 1989, when relations between US and China could have taken a nosedive, US-China relations continued in an even keel. Actually, I remember vividly in 1992 listening to the election speeches of Bill Clinton when he said famously in his campaign, "I will not coddle the butchers of Beijing if I become president of America." And when he became president, we could have very well seen a sharp nosedive in the relations between US and China. Instead, to my surprise, and I actually saw this in my own eyes, in November 1993, at the first APEC leaders meeting, which was held in Blake Island off Seattle, that's the first time that Bill Clinton and Jiang Zemin met face to face. And I could see that Jiang Zemin was incredibly uncomfortable, tense, and nervous, and trying to figure out what the US president would do to him in this small, close meeting where I was present. And to Jiang Zemin's surprise, and to my surprise, Bill Clinton coddled the butcher of Beijing. And it was a very wise decision on his part. And by the end of the day, if you had watched the body language of Jiang Zemin and Bill Clinton, amazingly, they were almost good friends at the end of the day, reflecting the great charm of Bill Clinton at the time.